Please, just make it fast," she whispered again, her voice trembling so violently that it seemed as if the words might shatter in the dry air. Nayeli had been running for hours, her small legs cutting through the rough grasslands, her breath ragged, chest burning with exhaustion. Dust clung to her hair, her clothes were torn, and her hands were scratched raw from grabbing branches and clinging to fences along the way. Behind her, the faint sound of pursuit, or maybe just her imagination, kept her heart hammering, each beat a drum of terror that echoed across the empty plains. She had no choice. She had nowhere else to go. Every instinct screamed at her to find safety, to escape the horror that had swallowed her village, her family, her life. When she finally stumbled into the clearing of Jedediah Crane's ranch, her legs threatened to give out entirely. The rancher stood there, silent and imposing, his broad shoulders outlined against the rising sun. His eyes were shadowed beneath the brim of his hat, unreadable, cold almost. But there was something else there too, something that hinted at the possibility of judgment and yet action. Nayeli fell to her knees, her voice barely audible as she repeated the desperate plea. "Please, just make it fast." She didn't know why those words had escaped her lips. She didn't know if she was asking for help or for the end of it all. Either way, she needed someone, anyone, to act. Jedediah's hands hung at his sides, calloused and steady, and he remained utterly still. In that moment, Nayeli felt as if time itself had stopped, the wind suspended mid-air, the chirping of birds silenced in awe of the tension between them. He looked at her, really looked, and the hardness in his eyes softened just enough to let a flicker of something human seep through. He had heard cries before. He had seen panic. He had even witnessed hopelessness. But there was something about this girl, the weight of despair pressed into her voice, that stirred something in him that he had long buried. Jedediah had built walls around himself decades ago, walls stronger than any stone, walls that had kept the world at a distance. Yet here she was, breaking through them with nothing but fear and a whispered plea. Without a word, he gestured for her to follow, and Nayeli, too weary to resist, stumbled after him. Every step she took was a small victory, a fragile declaration that she could still survive. The cabin he led her to was small and plain, built from weathered timber and smelling faintly of pine smoke and leather. There was no warmth in the decor, no attempt at hospitality beyond the basic, a hearth, a few chairs, a simple table. But in that simplicity, Nayeli sensed safety, a rare and delicate thing she had not felt since the world had turned against her. He handed her a tin cup of water, and she drank greedily, letting the cool liquid soothe the fire in her throat. She shivered, not from cold, but from a mix of adrenaline and exhaustion, and Jedediah watched silently. There were no comforting words, no promises that things would be all right, just observation, just presence. And yet in that quiet, Nayeli felt the first flicker of trust, fragile and flickering, like a candle in a storm. The days that followed were filled with an unspoken rhythm, a delicate balance between necessity and caution. Nayeli learned to move through the cabin and the ranch with care, stepping lightly, trying not to disturb the man who had, without explanation, become her guardian. She watched him work with the animals, his movements precise, almost ritualistic, and she began to understand that this was a man who operated according to his own strict code. Jedediah did not speak unnecessarily, did not offer comfort unless it was accompanied by action. Yet action mattered more than words. He did not coddle her, but he taught her skills essential for survival: how to tend a wound, how to move silently, how to read the subtle signs of the land that could mean danger or opportunity. One evening, after a long day of tracking deer and repairing fences, Nayeli dared to speak. Her voice was hesitant, almost afraid of the answer. "Why are you helping me? You don't even know me." Jedediah paused, leaning on the fence post, his eyes fixed on the horizon where the sun painted the plains in shades of gold and crimson. After a long moment he spoke, his voice rough but steady. "Because someone has to. And maybe because no one should face the world alone." The simplicity of his words struck her. No grand speeches, no false promises, just a truth that resonated deeper than any comfort she had been offered before. As the sun rose and set over the weeks that followed, the bond between them grew quietly, subtly. Nayeli learned to anticipate Jedediah's habits, the way he moved through the land, the rhythm of his days. In turn, he observed her resilience, her determination to survive despite the trauma she carried. They did not speak often of the horrors she had endured. Words could not capture the depth of loss and fear she had felt. But in silence, in shared tasks and unspoken understanding, they built a connection stronger than any conversation could have forged. Yet the world outside the ranch remained merciless. Raiders roamed the plains, whispers of violence and plunder carried on the wind, and every shadow beyond the cabin walls became a reminder that safety was temporary, fragile, almost imaginary. Nayeli flinched at every unexpected sound, every rustle of grass, and Jedediah's eyes would narrow in preparation, scanning the horizon for signs of threat. It was in these moments when the danger felt closest that Nayeli realized the depth of his courage. He was not just a rancher, not just a man accustomed to solitude. He was a protector, a force willing to act decisively to safeguard life. The night before the raiders arrived near the edge of his land, Jedediah sat with Nayeli beside the fire. The flames danced across their faces, casting long shadows that stretched and twisted in the quiet cabin. She dared to reach out, placing a tentative hand near his on the wooden floor. I don't know if I can do this," she whispered, voice fragile but full of fear. Jedediah's hand hovered over hers, then gently touched, a fleeting contact that spoke of reassurance more than words ever could. "You don't have to do it alone," he replied, his voice low and steady. And in that moment, Nayeli understood something she had never known. That trust could be built even in the harshest conditions. That courage could be shared, and that survival was not just about strength, but about connection. The following dawn brought with it an uneasy tension. The wind carried faint sounds across the plains, horses, the faint echo of voices, the unmistakable signs of approaching danger. Jedediah moved with quiet precision, preparing the cabin and the surrounding land for whatever might come. Nayeli watched him, awe mingled with fear. She had fled the world once, running for her life, but now she felt anchored in a strange, powerful way. Jedediah's unspoken resolve became hers too, a shield she could cling to, a testament to the unexpected bond forming between them. As the first silhouettes appeared against the rising sun, Nayeli felt her heart leap into her throat. Yet even as fear threatened to consume her, she realized that something remarkable had taken place in the weeks of quiet survival. She was not alone anymore. And in Jedediah's calm, deliberate preparation, she sensed the promise of something unthinkable, a man who, in a world that demanded cruelty, had chosen compassion, courage, and protection. The sun had barely crested the horizon when the first sounds of movement reached the cabin. Hooves pounding across the dry earth, voices raised in anger, a distant clatter that grew steadily closer. Nayeli's heart lurched in her chest, the familiar rush of panic rising, but this time it was tempered by something new, a fragile, hard-earned sense of trust. Jedediah had prepared for this as he had warned her the day before, moving with precision, checking every corner of the property, ensuring the horses were ready, and the windows and doors reinforced. Nayeli had never imagined that danger could arrive so suddenly, so violently, but she felt a strange, steady calm in his presence, a confidence that spoke louder than any words. When the raiders appeared over the rise, silhouetted against the dawn, Jedediah stepped forward, his rifle raised and his stance firm. The leader of the group, a tall man with a scar slashing across his cheek, laughed at the sight of the lone rancher, thinking him an easy target. But Jedediah's eyes were hard, unyielding, and when he spoke, his voice carried a weight that silenced even the mocking wind. "Leave now or you'll regret it." The laughter died in the man's throat. Nayeli could see the tension in the raiders' movements, the hesitation born not of fear, but of recognition. They were up against someone who did not bluff, someone whose courage was absolute. The attack began with chaos, the raiders charging down the hill, shouting and brandishing weapons. Jedediah's actions were swift and precise. He did not move with blind fury, but with deliberate purpose, striking only when necessary, protecting the cabin and Nayeli with a skill that was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. Nayeli crouched behind a stack of firewood, her hands gripping the rough boards, eyes wide with fear and amazement. She had never seen a man move with such quiet, lethal efficiency yet without cruelty. Each time Jedediah confronted a raider, he gave a choice, a warning, a chance to leave, and only when pressed did he act to defend. Time seemed to stretch as the fight continued, a blur of movement, shouts, and gunfire. Nayli felt her breath catch in her throat with each clash, her pulse thrumming with terror.